The name's Nap. It's not a good one, but it's mine. Here's a fun fact. It's actually short for Napoleon. Yep, named after the original Napoleon, not Napoleon Dynamite. I guess my folks wanted to set the bar real high for me. Well, either that or they knew I had burnout in my genes and figured it'd be funny. You know, in the ironic kind of way. Whatever the case, this isn't the story of a stupid name or the cruel parents who came up with it. That's just some background information. No, this is the story of how my life went completely off the rails in a pretty spectacular fashion. I'm not telling this tale for positive attention or because I'll come off looking good in it, because, spoiler alert, neither of those are true. The fact is, I'm telling you all this by way of confession. I'll pay dearly for that, I'm sure, but keeping it inside is killing me. And if I'm gonna die either way, it might as well be with a slightly clearer conscience. If, for whatever reason, you still find me endearing as you read this sentence, unlikely, but still worth a shot, eh? And you wish to continue feeling that way, feel free to close your eyes, plug your ears, and go do something else. This story will do nothing to preserve that blissful illusion. The rest of you? Well, better read on. It's only going to go downhill from here. First things first, I am not special. In fact, the only thing in life which has made me even close to special was an event entirely beyond my prediction or control. That event is the subject of the story. See, it could have happened to anyone. There were no special requirements. I just happened to be one of the people who tore off an email tab on a flyer pinned to a corkboard in a university basement. And of those people, perhaps 100, perhaps a few hundred, perhaps even 1,000, I was one of the 2 that got screwed. Foiled again by my greatest enemy, math. When I said that I had burnout in my genes a few paragraphs ago, I wasn't kidding. Everyone in my family has fucked up in one way or another. In the process of climbing towards their futile little dreams, they've fallen off the disappointment tree and smashed into every branch on the way down. Now, I'm a little different to that, at least. The crucial difference is that I never had any of their futile dreams in the first place. Nope, those pesky ambitions have never bogged me down, no siree. All in all, I've been pretty content with my lot in life, lousy as it may be. I'm reminded of the advice my Uncle Ted gave me when I was 11. You see, kid, being famous don't count for shit. Any idiot can do it. Hell, you don't need talent to be well known. You could become a goddamn serial killer and make every paper in the country. Only a moron couldn't do it. Uncle Ted was arrested and jailed on 1 count of homicide back in 2007. He wasn't even in the local paper afterwards. In other words, he was, by his own definition, a moron. I'm not a moron. I'm a loser. What's the difference, you ask? Self-awareness. That's all there is to it. I flip from job to job regularly and never really holding down one. You know, just living paycheck to paycheck, surviving. I only ever need enough to pay for my next meal and to financially substantiate my few simple pleasures in life, which is to say pornography, a nice mature cheddar, and video games. Because I'm neither 55 nor a child molester, I don't need to download my porn. I just get it for free on the internet like everybody else. I could also lump the mature cheddar under my next meal, leaving me with just the video games. My sweet, sweet video games. The only thing I've ever really come close to being good at. Video games, incidentally, were one of the reasons I got into this whole stupid mess to begin with. Since then, I have to admit I've gone off them a little. Bad experiences will do that to a person. I'm upwards of 18 and below 25, and I don't have a driver's license, so my career prospects are pretty limited. The last job I worked before things went septic was a janitor position at a local university. The work was simple enough. Mop, tidy, disinfect. Nothing too taxing, just boring as hell. So I'd read the bulletin boards in my spare time and look at whatever nonsense the professors had left scrawled on their blackboards. I was hoping for my Goodwill Hunting moment where I'd find out I was secretly a super genius at quantum physics or textiles or some shit, but that moment never came. Instead, the moment that did arrive was me finding a light green flyer pinned to the lower left corner of a basement bulletin board while I was wiping up a highly scientific puddle. It was something about testing a new invasive gaming technology for, I shit you not, blood donation. My curiosity hadn't been that piqued since I opened a 4-week-old tub of pudding and it looked like a chia pet. What's more, they were offering $50 for participation. How the hell could I pass that up? The tabs had an email and a phone number. Like most normal Americans, I'm awkward as hell over the phone, so emailing the company back was my first port of call. Those 50 smackaroos were so close I could almost taste them. That's like 10 meals at McDonald's, or 1 pack of Krispy Kreme donuts. And I didn't even have to work for it. Just the idea of it was the closest I'd ever come to the American dream. When I expressed interest and informed them that I fit the insanely loose criteria, by which I mean not being a hemophiliac or suffering from any bloodborne diseases, I was given a location and a time. For your safety, I won't divulge the location. I wouldn't want any foolhardy do-gooder to take matters into their own hands. That only works in the movies. Real life is considerably less fair. Of course, at the time I was as happy as could be. It was like being Charlie and seeing his golden ticket. As far as I was concerned, I was already halfway up Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and you can take that any way you damn well please. It excited me so much, in fact, that I was able to pry my lazy ass out of bed at the ungodly hour of 6:30 a.m. and walk all the way to the company's facility in town. As much as I'd love to tell you it was some big gothic castle festooned with moss and guarded by a legion of hideous gargoyles, that was not the case. It looked like any other boring office building in any other vaguely metropolitan city. Large, nondescript, and brutalist. Funny story, I actually learned the word brutalist while reading some architecture magazine on the table in the waiting room. The receptionist was a cute guy, and I didn't want to seem like a dumbass in front of him, so I picked up the smartest looking magazine and pretended that I understood it. Soon enough, a door next to the reception desk opened and a man wearing an outfit that looked like it could be more valuable than my entire net worth stepped out. I'm not ashamed to admit I was intimidated by him on sight. "Are you Napoleon?" he said with a grin. His teeth bore the artificial sheen of a man who could afford regular tooth whitening. "You know, you're taller than I pictured you." I smiled and stood up. It was not the first time I heard that joke, but seeing as money was involved, I felt more inclined to fake some amusement. Hey, yeah, just call me Nap. It feels less stupid. I leaned in to shake his hand, and he returned the favor. "Are you Dr. Larson, the one from the flyer?" He gave me an insincere chuckle and shook his head. "No, I'm Rick Mills, her assistant," he said. "I just want to brief you on a few legal matters before we get started. The test requires 2 participants, and we're still waiting for your partner to arrive." Leaving my architecture magazine on the waiting room coffee table, I was led further into the bowels of the building. Rick had a confidence in his stride that I'd always lacked, and I found myself wondering why a scientist assistant would be dressing like hotshot lawyer. That was the first clue that I was part of a larger operation here. "We greatly appreciate your participation on this, Mr. Kolinsky," Rick said without turning around. "What we're working on here is going to save hundreds of thousands of lives. I hope you take satisfaction in knowing you are a part of it." That's real neat." "Indeed it is, Mr. Kolinsky," he replied without breaking stride. "Mind if I ask about your name?" I suppressed a groan and forced another smile. "Napoleon?" Yeah, it's definitely a conversation piece. Normally people need to go insane before they start calling themselves Napoleon. Me? No such luck. "Oh no, I meant your last name. Is it Latvian?" He led me into an even smaller room, sat me down on a cold metal stool, and placed an almighty stack of papers onto the desk in front of me. No, I replied, suddenly made sheepish by the sheer volume of paperwork. "It's Polish." "Huh. I noticed you didn't have an accent." "I'm 3rd generation." "That's interesting." It wasn't. Rick talked me through the signing process, with me fighting hard to stay awake throughout. It was too early in the morning to be swallowing cornflakes, not to mention wordy legal jargon. The gist is that it protected their company from any legal consequences should something go wrong, though Rick assured me that the chances of something like that happening were literally perhaps less than 1 in a million, and several legally binding non-disclosure agreements. I won't insult your intelligence by telling you what that means. It was only once I'd conquered Liability Waiver Mountain that I was finally free to proceed to the room where the experiment was going to take place, and frankly, it felt like something out of a sci-fi movie. I walked through a door that looked like an electric submarine bulkhead around 10 inches thick and fitted with more technology than a modern passenger jet. The chamber itself was a dazzling white from wall to wall, with the room divided clearly in half by a large pane of glass. I was led to a chair that sat just left of the glass where, with my permission, according to the papers I signed, my legs were strapped firmly in place. A large flat-screen TV sat in front of me, and below it rested a bizarre game console fitted with a large translucent bag. Rick carefully handed me the controller, then took what appeared to be an armband attached to a long plastic tube leading from the console. "This may nip a little. I'm about to insert the needle," Rick said as he approached me, wrapping the armband around my bicep. Shortly after, Rick pushed into the tube, and I felt cold metal pierce my skin. I winced in pain but didn't make a noise, figuring it couldn't hurt any more than a standard inoculation. The armband was tightening just up to the point of discomfort, but no further. It was then locked with a series of complicated-looking straps. "Ah, Dr. Larson," Rick said, looking at the door behind me. "Perfect timing. This is Nap Kalinsky, the last subject for today." Dr. Larson came clicking into view. She was an exceedingly tall blonde woman with piercing green eyes. When she spoke firmly and authoritatively, and her accent could only really be described as ambiguously Nordic. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Kalinsky. On behalf of myself and the organization I represent, I'd like to thank you for your participation. You're doing a wonderful thing here." She leaned over and began prodding at the console. The console I now realized was attached to a needle in my arm. The deep surreality of the situation around me seemed to be mounting by the minute. "Has Rick explained the purpose of the experiment to you, Nap?" she said, almost tripping over the weirdness of my name, just like everyone else. "Has he explained the potential applications of the machine?" I shook my head. Words were failing me. "Essentially, Mr. Kalinsky, we are a country in crisis," she said, beginning to pace around the room. "If I told you the amount of accidents or cases of chronic illness occurring in this country, or better yet, the entire world, that could be solved by a simple blood transfusion, you might find it almost comforting. However, if I told you the supplies of usable blood we, as a country and as a planet, have in stock to combat this issue, you'd be likely to spend as many nights without sleep as I have." Rick had left the room by this point, presumably to make my partner jump through the same legal hoops that I had. "Blood donation seems to be declining in popularity as populations continue to rise," Dr. Larson continued. "While there has been talk of engineering synthetic blood in future, we are some distance away from applying that solution in a manner widespread enough to have any meaningful impact. Therefore, it became my personal goal to offer a stopgap. Something that would provoke interest in blood donation again and help attack the deficit we're currently facing." "I see," I said, trying my best to sound intelligent and comprehend the flow of the conversation. "My solution, Mr. Kalinsky, was to make a game of it. The console I have created here," she said, pointing to the console below the TV, "allows blood donors to take part in an ever-widening array of games, and when one, say, is injured in one of the games being played, the console extracts a small quantity of blood from the player. Once the time is up, the game ends, having taken a safe but substantial volume of life-saving blood from the donor." It sounded equal parts fascinating and utterly insane. Either way, I found myself at rapt attention. "We intend, pending the success of our experiments, to install these consoles in every blood bank in the country. If it proves a success and blood donation in the US seems to increase notably, we intend to distribute them internationally. It could revolutionize a key component of modern medicine and allow us to combat one of the most pervasive medical issues in the country. This is what you're helping us do here, Nap." I hadn't noticed at the time, but during Dr. Larson's spiel, my partner had been brought into the room on the other side of the glass. He seemed about my age, but way more attractive. Athletic build, tan skin, a beautiful head of black hair. I'd have asked him for a date after the experiment if he wasn't so obviously out of my league. If you're wondering why I focused on this at the time while Dr. Larson was still pitching her blood-sucking Xbox, it's because I was very, very lonely. What? Might as well stay honest now. While they hooked the handsome stranger up to the machine, Dr. Larson explained the experiment to me. We were playing a competitive variant of the console, allowing two donors to play head-to-head. The external doors to the chamber would seal during the game to prevent any distractions from the experimenters, and the glass divider between us would also prevent any unnecessary distraction from each other. The game would last approximately 20 minutes. If we were evenly matched by that point, it would take a safe amount of blood from both of us. We would then be given time to recuperate, eat some free food, and leave happily with our $50 and the knowledge we helped advance the field of medical science with our participation. Piece of cake. Soon after that, Dr. Larson had wished us both good luck and vacated the chamber with Rick, leaving me and Mr. Handsome with our controllers. The screens of our televisions flickered into life in unison as the game began to load. At this point, as Dr. Larson had explained to both of us, they didn't have the rights to any actual brand name games, so what we were playing was a generic fighting game in the vein of Tekken or Mortal Kombat, real arcade type stuff. Before the game began, I turned my head to Mr. Handsome and gave him a suggestive grin. He returned it and I felt myself blushing. I figured the console would take that red out of my cheeks soon enough. We selected our characters and the game began. Rather than a health bar, we had 10 lives. I guess that each life corresponded to some minute quantity of my blood. To begin with, we both really went for it. Attacks, blocks, evasive maneuvers. For the first 2 or 3 minutes, neither of us landed a successful hit. When the first hit was logged, at the time I would have been proud to say that it was me that pushed the button. Out of morbid curiosity, my eyes quickly shifted to Mr. Handsome. I saw him wince and gasp soundlessly as the console took its debt from him. When he landed his first hit against me, around 5 minutes into the game, I found out why. Contrary to the lie Dr. Larson had, perhaps unknowingly, sold us, the process was incredibly painful. It felt like a pair of lips wrapping themselves around a wound on your arm and sucking for dear life. Even then, part of me was suspicious that it was taking more blood than it should have been. If only I'd known it was going to get so much worse. By around 10 minutes, and Mr. Handsome and I were both down to 5, and I could tell from the look on his face that we were both, for lack of a better word, fucked. Our energy had depleted, we'd gotten paler, more lethargic. Dr. Larson's vampiric console was taking more than its fill. I could see the translucent blood bag swelling with dull red. It was almost enough to make you puke. Dr. Larson, something isn't right. I feel sick, I called out in no particular direction. I saw Mr. Handsome's mouth moving through the glass. I'm no lip reader, but my gut feeling was that he was raising a similar complaint. In response to our concerns, an unseen speaker somewhere in the chamber crackled into life. Dr. Larson's normally calm voice now appeared a little cracked, a little frantic. Her mask of composure was slowly falling off, and that terrified me.
There appears to be some kind of malfunction,
Dr. Larson said, though there was no good way to phrase it.
It's something to do with the computer system. We're trying to remedy the problem, so I would not advise that you panic.
Mr. Handsome yelled something in the other room. I decided I'd join in. We've only got 8 minutes left, Doctor, I said. I'm feeling sick and so is he. Can't you open the fucking door and get us both out?
It's a little more complex than that, Mr. Kalinsky. The doors are tamper-proof. They won't open until one of you's defeated or the game times out.
If I wasn't panicking before, I definitely was then. But don't you have any fail-safes for this? I asked. Well, begged.
We did, Mr. Kalinsky, but they failed.
What?
We're working on a solution as fast as we can. Perhaps it would be best to allow the game to time out.
If garbage was a feeling, then I was feeling it. Mr. Handsome was now looking more like Mr. Half-Dead, too. It's taking too much blood, Dr. Larson. Your goddamn console is broken. If it times out, I think it'll kill us. It'll kill us both, for fuck's sake! It felt as though a bomb had dropped. I don't think Mr. Handsome could hear what I said, but from Dr. Larson's long, pregnant silence, I think he was more than aware of the implications. We lost another precious 30 seconds waiting on a reply from the good doctor.
I think,
she finally said, her voice stricken with pain and terror, realizing at last what the hell she'd done.
I think that perhaps it would be best if one of you defeated the other. Then it's far more likely at least one of you would survive, and we could minimize losses.
There it was. The one thing nobody wanted to hear, but what both of us knew was coming. Part of me could have sworn that Dr. Larson was crying by the end of her sentence. I gave one mournful look at Mr. Handsome, and he gave another one right back. We picked up our controllers and carried on playing. 5 minutes. 5 lives. 1 lives, 1 dies. We both fought well as you'd expect from men fighting for their lives. Within the first of the 5 minutes, we knocked another life off of each other. The machine sucked away and we felt ourselves getting weaker, getting closer to death. I managed to get another lucky hit on Mr. Handsome's avatar soon after, and I saw his mouth twist into a wide oval of pain through the glass. The blood bag on his console burst open, spreading out a shimmering red puddle over the formerly white tiles. It'd taken far more from him now than the bag could have possibly held. Mr. Handsome was weak now. His thumbs began slipping off the sticks, and whatever control he had over his avatar began falling apart. It sickened me to see him like this, but truth be told, I feared death more than I loved a beautiful stranger. I took advantage of his weakness and hit him twice, knocking him down to 1 more life. His console spat out a thick stream of blood into the empty air where the bag would have been. He hadn't been fully defeated, but the guy was done. The controller clattered to the ground and he slumped back in his chair. There were tears streaming down his cheeks and mine as he turned his head and, with whatever ounce of strength he had left, and stared at me imploringly through the glass. With trembling lips, I saw him mouth the word, "Please." With a heavy heart, I mouthed the word, "Sorry." There was only a minute left. 1 final hit, and he was gone. The console splurted out its last mouthful of blood, and Mr. Handsome died strapped to that goddamn chair. The game was over. I was saved. The pressurized doors of the chamber finally clicked open. I retained consciousness for 15 seconds before blacking out from blood loss as 2 pairs of footsteps, presumably that of Dr. Larson and Rick, came scrambling into the room behind me. When I woke up a few hours later, I was wearing a medical smock, laying in an unfamiliar bedroom somewhere inside that awful building. Rick sat on a metal stool across from me, looking morose. How are you feeling?" he asked. "You son of a bitch," I replied, trying to sit up before collapsing back down. "Don't try to sit up," he said. "You've been the victim of a very unfortunate accident. You ought to rest, regain your strength." "Fuck you." "Being belligerent won't help you, Mr. Kalinsky. All I ask of you is a little longer so I can explain the situation." I did as he said and laid silently, more out of weakness than anything else. "Mr. Kalinsky, on behalf of myself, Dr. Larson, and the company, I offer a sincere apology for what you've gone through. The body of Mr. Lopez, your partner, has been discreetly incinerated. His records and security camera footage of him entering the building have been erased, and if any concerned family members ask about his whereabouts, we will tell them that he never showed up. These are all concrete facts. They cannot be changed or reversed." Tears were hot on my cheeks again. Lopez. So that was the name of the man I'd killed. "Now, allow me to lay out your options. There are 2 paths you can take. In the first path, you're cooperative. You remember our legally binding non-disclosure agreements? You remain discreet and walk away from this building with the princely sum of $1.5 million. You will live happily and without a care for some time. You will forget this place." What I found more sinister than anything in this already exceedingly sinister situation was Rick's calmness. He barely seemed to even blink during his entire speech. "The second path," he said, "is where you disregard our legal contracts. You decide to blab about what you've seen here, nobody believes you, they think you're insane, and then, once everyone tires of your crazy ramblings, you will disappear entirely and nobody will care. So, Mr. Kalinsky, what do you choose?" God, I'd love to tell you all that I did the principled thing right then. I'd love to tell you I'm now on the run, that I'd refuse to take any of that blood money, and that I'd fight them to the last breath. But, I committed to honesty at the start of the story, and I don't see any point in deviating now. With my $1.5 million generously provided by the organization that almost killed me, I bought myself a brand new car, a nicer apartment, and enough delicious food to last me quite some time. Rick was right. I had the means to live comfortably within my means for long enough to put all that ridiculousness behind me. So you're probably wondering, why the hell am I compromising all that and telling you this? Well, the fact is, I can't get in that new car without seeing those beautiful eyes looking at me from the back seat when I adjust my rearview mirror. I can't spend a night in that new apartment without thinking of the home he'd never go back to and the empty space he left in his family's life. Hell, I can't even take a single bite of all that expensive food without tasting the spilled blood of Mr. Lopez. Right now, dying for telling the truth doesn't seem like such a bad thing. This story's for you, Lopez, by way of an apology for what I did to survive. It's a temporary measure, of course, because if that organization is as ruthless as they say they are, and as honest as I am, it won't be long before I can tell you myself. And you know what? I look forward to it, partner.